All right, YouTube, I know that my channel is a haven for people who are fans of multiculturalism and they love diversity, and everything about being diverse and multicultural gives them the warm, fuzzy feeling inside. But I'm starting to think there might be a little bit of an issue with multiculturalism over in Europe since the Belgians have begun handing out iodine pills to essentially everybody within the country. Now, they say it's because of the possibility of a nuclear emergency. You know, when your nation is the size of a small U.S. state, and you have a nuclear meltdown, a Fukushima, a Chernobyl situation, basically most of your economy's down the toilet as far as agriculture and other goods. If either of Belgium's aging, fucked up nuclear plants that have problems anyway were to suddenly go off Chernobyl mode, an enormous proportion of the country's land area would be completely and utterly uninhabitable. The problem being, of course, they've got a high population density and they already don't grow enough food to feed themselves. You know, where are all these Belgian beers going to go? How are they going to manufacture their chocolate when it starts glowing in the dark? But I have a sneaking suspicion it has a little bit more to do with the fact that they've had attacks in Belgium, and of course ISIS has already openly stated they're plotting to build a dirty bomb and detonate it in Belgium or Europe at large. They've been talking shit about the UK for several years now, and it's really, unfortunately, only a matter of time because of the open border policy there that they managed to actually do this. It's not like the US where to get nuclear material in, they're going to have to get it aboard a plane. They're going to have to get it aboard a ship. It's going to have to pass several customs checks. In Europe, it's easy. They've got a porous border situation. If they can get it into Turkey, they can get it into any part of the EU. This is why it has become so dangerous. And of course, in the European Union, we had, for instance, I'll give you an example from here on this side of the pond where multiculturalism is not quite as in vogue as it is in most parts of Western Europe. In San Bernardino, a lot of people had seen strange packages and people meeting in the middle of the night and the Allah Akbar sort of stuff with the San Bernardino attackers for some time before the attack actually occurred. And nobody said anything specifically because they said, well, I don't want to be labeled as racist or bigoted in some way because these people were of Middle Eastern origin. They were speaking Arabic or whatever. How much more pronounced will that be in Europe? How many people, even like actual police and people like that, are actually going to be willing to stop somebody on the side of the road because a radiation detector goes off? They're just going to go about their day. They'll wave them through. They'll say, yeah, maybe it's a threat, but, they're 99% of the time it's not. I'm not going to be that guy who looks like the bigot and potentially gets written up or something. And so they'll do nothing. If the Belgians, who are generally a relaxed, easygoing people, unless they happen to be in the Congo at the time, of course, under Leopold, if they're handing out radiation pills to everyone, potassium iodide pills, to basically everybody in the country, you know that there's a fucking risk. It's very difficult to get a European government to take its citizens' security seriously. We've seen this before. The European governments have basically tried to bury their head in the sand and say nothing's happening, nothing's wrong, with attack after attack, riot after riot, a random street mugging or beating after random street mugging or beating as the rape levels rise across Europe because they're not even bothering to check whether anyone who's supposedly a refugee comes in has a criminal history or ties to some terrorist organization. As that continues to become more and more prevalent, the European governments are essentially doing nothing. We've seen, for example, mass rape in the UK. We saw there were several sex rings being run there entirely by Islamic males, middle-aged Islamic males, who were drugging young girls and then pimping them out by the dozens or hundreds. And nothing really happened. The government was complicit in covering this up. And at the time I said, well, I expect this is going to basically implode a large proportion of the British government. People are going to rise up in rank and say, what the fuck are you people doing? At the end of the day, very little ended up happening. Most people either appeared to be oblivious of that fact, of these sex rings that were going on in the UK. They were either ambivalent, or they simply didn't want to say anything because they felt more afraid of being labeled a racist or a bigot or an Islamophobe. Or an Asiaphobe, as they would probably term in the UK. They keep using the term Asian males to denote people from Pakistan instead of, Japanese or Korean. I'm sure that Japanese immigrants would love to be conflated with a bunch of crazed jihadist Pakistanis running a sex ring. I'm sure that they feel very happy about that from the UK's authorities. But essentially, nobody did anything. They were more afraid of that being labeled a bigot than they are of the terrorism going on, or of the spike in crime, or of the fact that their home might get broken into and a bunch of so-called refugees who are actually economic migrants from somewhere unaffected by any larger scale war or disaster come into their house. They can't even fight back. They just say, oh, sit down, you're going to watch your daughter and wife and mother all get raped and murdered at the same time because there's nothing, these people are disarmed and too weak to fight back, essentially. It's amazing. It was like years ago when a British soldier was hacked apart on the street by, I believe, a Somali refugee who was an Islamo-fascist carrying a butcher knife, essentially. A crowd gathered and watched him, and after he was done butchering him and they didn't step in to stop him, plainclothes cops just sat there and did fucking nothing to call for backup so they could get someone in there that actually had a firearm or a taser or was even allowed to carry a billy club or some mace. I don't even think the plainclothes cops in Britain are even allowed to carry that anymore. They can't even carry a dildo to shove up their ass when the fighting begins. While he was milling around, basically, he went up to some women and said, oh, I'm sorry you had to see that, Allah Akbar, it's the will of God, so, I'm sorry for that. I mean, it's surreal. How can you people even exist under these conditions? To somebody in a country where the Second Amendment fundamentally guarantees, doesn't grant the right, but guarantees the right, enumerates it, that we can defend ourselves, that we can own weapons, in which the government is at least a little bit more fucking accountable, in which, people don't blindly approve of the government in every stupid and crazy thing that it does. I mean, it seems fantastic. It's very strange to watch what goes on in Europe. If the U.S. government were to start handing out potassium iodide pills to the entire population, people would be very concerned indeed. And yet over in Europe, they're doing this in Belgium, and it seems like nobody even bats an eye. Over here, we talk about it, we say, well, what the fuck's going on? Is this because their nuclear plants are so bad they could, feasibly suddenly explode for no reason in a shower of flames and start emitting, radioactive smoke across most of northwestern Europe? Is that why, or is it because they've got some reason to believe that ISIS actually has a dirty bomb or is really close to getting one? By the way, the deployment of a dirty bomb would be far worse than the deployment of a standard atomic warhead or something. Yes, the latter does a lot more damage, but the contamination level is less. You can go to the ground zero of the Trinity test, see the marker that's actually there. Yeah, it's radioactive, but it's not particularly dangerous unless you intend to camp there or drink out of a stagnant puddle that happens to have pooled up next to the monument or something. You deploy a dirty bomb in an urban area, you're fucked for a long time, because that radioactive material has been packed around a standard explosive, strewn around on the wind. Downwind is going to be heavily contaminated, so will the immediate surroundings. And that area will be uninhabitable for a very, very long time. Decontaminating it will be a nightmare. And in the case of a nation like Belgium, again, you don't have that large a land area. If the United States got hit by a dirty bomb, we'd lose a city. That city's economy would be completely incapacitated. Everybody would flee. It would be mass panic nationwide, but ultimately we would realize, hey, 99.99% of our land area is at least still usable. Ultimately, economically speaking, the hit's fairly small. In Belgium, they can't do that. In Belgium, it's like any randomly selected U.S. state and smaller than many of them. State of Texas is the size of France. Belgium's a hell of a lot smaller than France. Belgium, I think it'd be more on par with West Virginia, or maybe a state the size of New York, maybe. I'm not exactly sure. I'll look it up and I'll provide a comparison in the description. But yeah, they're passing around potassium iodide to everyone. Now, the funniest thing is their health minister there is morbidly obese. She's almost 500 pounds or some shit. So that, I mean, it's almost, if it weren't so terrifyingly bad, for a people that, the Belgians don't deserve to suffer. They're not a warlike, constantly warmongering people. I mean, when's the last time you thought of Belgium and you said, oh, those are those barbarians that went into some third world nation and killed everybody. Last time they did that was the Congo, and people were astonished to find what Leopold had done, to the point where even the British, which were also exploiting their colonies, said enough is fucking enough. Get Leopold out of there because this is too butcherous even for us. It was ultimately the worst colonial move in the history of mankind, but that was a long time ago. And again, as I said on my previous video, I believe on the topic of colonialism, of course, the Congolese are not generally known for attempting to deploy IEDs in Belgium. When they do, maybe we can talk about whether they have a legitimate grievance against the Belgian people or its government, but these are all a bunch of Somalians and Pakistanis and so forth doing this. I think it must be scary for the Belgian people, but again, don't expect any of them to actually talk about it, because, I mean, if they say anything, if they say, yeah, it's a problem that we've got so many possible terrorists in the country and the government's basically abandoned the concept of the nation state entirely, they'd probably get dragged off to jail for being a racist or something like that. Europe is very, very politically correct, extremely censored. There are plenty of third world nations out there that are less censored than Europe. It's like my channel. My channel is banned in Germany. Not all the videos that I make, but the channel itself is unavailable in Germany. Last I checked, it was unavailable as well in Italy. And, Israel. I wonder why. It's available everywhere in Africa that they would have an internet connection. Egyptians can watch my channel. Saudi Arabians can watch my channel. There are nations in Europe that appear to be more censorship friendly than the Saudi Arabians or the Turks. You know, Erdogan shuts down Twitter every other month as a sort of celebration or something, and yet it's still accessible in the nation of Turkey. And yet I can't even be seen, my channel can't, by Germans and many other people in Europe. I find it very strange. The fact that people put up with this, which it should be intolerable. The fact that people put up with it is very strange indeed to me. So yeah, they're getting their potassium iodide. I've already got a pack of it. I played too much Fallout. I've also got a big pile of bottle caps though, so you know, take that as you will. That's about all. Peace out.